seat if you haven't already. Hopefully, you guys all survived Mother's Day and all the moms are happy. Because we all know if mom's not happy, then no one's happy, right? You ever been talked into something? You ever been involved where the speaker is so just energetic and passionate about what they're talking about that you just think, I could do that. I'm going to do what they tell me to do. I think I could do that. I was reminded this week of a time I was up at summer camp, and for those of you who have young ones, Christian summer camp, fantastic thing. Highly recommended. I was up at summer camp, and the speaker was talking, and he was talking about spiritual gifts. And I had heard so many conversations about spiritual gifts that I just kind of tuned it out because, when you're young and you go to summer camp, it's really more for the games than for the preaching. But we're up there, and he's talking, and all of a sudden, he piqued my interest. And he's talking about spiritual gifts and how great it is when you work out of your spiritual gifts. And he's talking. I start thinking to myself, I wonder what my spiritual gifts are. Now, mind you, I'm in elementary school. I'm not even in junior high yet. I'm going into junior high soon. I have very little idea of what spiritual gifts are. And so as I start to think, I start to make a list of my quote-unquote spiritual gifts, right? Like, I'm funny. It's not really a spiritual gift, but I'm young. You got to take pity on me here. I like games. I'm easy to get along with. I can talk to adults. A lot of kids can't talk to adults. I'm thinking, that's a gift. That's a spiritual gift from God. It's not. But I'm writing all of these things down, trying to figure out where I should work out of my spiritual gifts. And later in the week, I run into him. We're both on our way down to dinner, and he's talking to me, and I'm telling him how fired up I was about his talk and how I'm trying to figure out my spiritual gifts. And he says, you should run games for your youth group. And I thought, light bulb moment. Like, yes, I like to play games. I like to play with other people. This makes sense. I like to have fun. Like, all of this works for me. And so, end of the week comes, I go back, and my church is deciding to host a VBS. And so I think to myself, this is my opportunity, guys. I'm going to host all of the fun for the VBS, right? And they're like, hey, do you want a team? I'm like, no, I'm gifted. It's fine, guys. This is my spiritual gift. Yeah, you all know how this is going to go. And so I'm like, yes, this is perfect. And so I host all of the games for VBS. I'm the hype guy, the fun guy, all these things. And I don't know if you've ever been a part of a VBS, but we had about 30 or 40 from toddler to elementary school age students. They're not very easy to corral. And I say corral in all the senses of the word. Because I'm thinking I'm gifted and this has been spoken truth into my life. Like, this is great and this is going to be awesome. And then it happens and I got toddlers wandering away. I got kids crying. I got people confused. I'm like, why is no one having fun? And pretty soon as the week is drawing to a close, I realize I'm not having fun. No one is having fun. I'm supposed to be the guy who has all the fun and I'm not even having fun. Trying our best to make it work. And at the end of the week, I think to myself, guys, maybe I'm not gifted. I don't know that I want to do this the rest of my life. And I realized that just because you have a spiritual gift does not mean you are the best at whatever that gift is. That we still have to work and grow our gifts. That it takes practice and teamwork and all of these things to grow in a spiritual gift. And this morning I want to look at a story of a guy named Philip, because Philip is a guy who is all in with God, and he works out of his gifts to do amazing things. You see, Philip is the first person in the Bible who is declared and named an evangelist. He's also the first person outside of the apostles who's working miracles and preaching and teaching in such a way that the Bible recognizes what he does. And here's the thing, we are all called to evangelize. And I know that some of us we're sitting here thinking this morning, I don't like talking to people. I get it. Sometimes talking to people, and especially talking to people about God, is difficult. But Jesus gave us a commandment that is for each and every one of us, and that is to make disciples of all nations. So on some level, we have to evangelize. And yes, evangelism is a spiritual gift. And sometimes you meet people and they have this gift and they have honed this gift and they can evangelize till they're blue in the face and a lot of people come to Christ, and that is great. And if it's not you, it's not me, we are still called to evangelize. And so there's some things that we need to prepare for if we're going to evangelize. There's some things that Philip teaches us. And the first is this: if we are going to evangelize, we need to be prepared to unlearn bad habits. You see, Philip is called to evangelize in a town, in a group of people called Samaria, right? And so the Samaritans. And he's called to evangelize to Samaria. And when he goes out there, there's this other guy who's already evangelizing for something else. There's this other guy who's already trying to preach this I am God, I am magic kind of gospel. His name is Simon. And Simon has developed a huge following because of his quote-unquote magic. And I don't really know what his quote-unquote magic is, but he's gathered a lot of people that think Simon is some great prophet or person, not of God, but of some other god or being. And so when Philip goes out there, he has to help these people understand that they've been misled. I don't know about you guys, but there are some bad habits that I've learned along the way in life that I had to let go of in order to better reach people for God. And Philip gets up and he says, hey, this is not the right way to go about life. And as the Bible continues in verse 10 through 12 is this story. It says, they, being the Samaritans, all paid attention to him, being Simon, from the least to the greatest, saying, this man is the power of God that is called great. Man, were they misinformed. It continues, and they paid attention to him because for a long time he had amazed them with his magic. But when they believed Philip as he preached good news about the kingdom of God in the name of Jesus Christ, they were baptized, both men and women. So Philip came and he unseated all of this bad habits, all of these things that the people had trusted that they should not have put their trust in. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes we put our trust in the wrong things. I remember when I was younger, I took my first missions trip. I love going on missions trips. I've gone on quite a few, and I was on my first missions trip, and I was in elementary school getting ready to go into junior high, and we're down in Central America, and it had been a long day. And at the end of the day, the team had all gathered, and we were playing this game where there was quote-unquote bad guys, and they were trying to eliminate the good guys before the bad guys, or before the good guys found them. This is a card game. And there was this discussion point. And as the game kind of continues and slowly people are kind of getting out and they're whittling away at people, there comes this moment where I'm pretty sure my pastor is one of the bad guys in this game, right? But I've been conditioned over a handful of years at church to always trust my pastor, right? And so he goes, no, I'm good. I'm like, all right, well, he's good. But I'm starting to think, maybe he's not. Maybe this is just part of the game. And it comes down to me casting a vote on who is good and who is bad. And first off, you don't put that kind of pressure on a fifth grader, right? That's just way too much. But I'm trying to choose between these people, both of whom I've learned to trust in my life. And my pastor goes, look, it's not me. I'm like, well, I'm inclined to believe you. You're supposed to always tell me the truth, right? Even though this is a game. And the other leader in the church, and good friend of mine, and she goes, well, it's not me. And she's pleading with me. Kyle, I know that you trust him. I know all these things. It's not me. We could win the game together. And he's looking at me, and he just goes, hey, do you trust me or do you not trust me? That's a lot of pressure for a fifth grader. It's a very difficult moment. And you know what I did? I trusted him, and we lost. It was crazy, guys. Don't always trust your pastors. No, sometimes we place too much trust in things that we should not place trust in. Now, listen, my pastor is a great guy, and he was a fantastic guy, a fantastic pastor and a fantastic guy. But I thought in my young brain that trust was always trust, even in the midst of a game, which, you know, come to find out, like, the whole point of the game was to lie and deceive people, and, like, he just did phenomenal at it. But sometimes we place our trust not just in people that we shouldn't, but in things that we shouldn't. Sometimes in life, we find ourselves mistrusting the things of God because we have these preconceived notions, these bad habits, these things that we have developed in our life that prevent us from achieving what God has for us. And listen, sometimes this is family members. Sometimes this is people in our family that have been spewing and telling us things that are contrary to God. And this doesn't mean excommunicate your family. It doesn't mean don't talk to your family. Nothing like that. But it is to say that if we are going to evangelize, if we are going to pursue what God has for us, we need to learn to trust in God and not these other things in our lives. And I get it. There are people in our lives that have earned that right to speak truth to us. But here's the rub. Each and every one of us are fallen. And despite our best attempts, we're not always perfect. In fact, we're never perfect. But God is. And if we're going to put our trust anywhere, we need to learn to put our trust in God. The next thing is that if we are going to pursue evangelism, not only do we need to be prepared to unlearn bad habits, but we need to be prepared to give up something good for something great. You see, Philip is an interesting character because he's not an apostle, but he was one of the deacons that was first appointed by the apostles to manage the affairs of the church. If you backtrack a little bit in Acts, the apostles got together and they said, hey, we can't be dealing with logistics. God himself has given us this calling, and we need to do these things, so let's appoint some people, right? Stephen is one of these people that was appointed. Philip is another one of these people that has been appointed to this position. His job is to handle logistics that come up in the church. But get this. When Philip is called to evangelize to Samaria, he has to, by necessity, give up what God has already given him. You can't manage logistics if you are halfway around the world doing something else. You can't hear from the people and what the people need and how to organize things in the church because he's doing something else. And especially in this day and age, right? Nowadays we think airplanes, emails, we can figure this out. They didn't have any of that. They had letters that may or may not make it over a longer course of time. So by necessity, Philip had to give up something good, something that he had most likely been so proud to receive. One of the 7, he was this highly appointed position in the church, and he was doing great work for God. Philip thought, this is amazing. But he gave it up for something else that God had for him. If we are going to be prepared to evangelize, we have to be prepared to give up something good for something great. I had a friend who found God and came to church and was on fire for God as only new believers are. And I don't know if you guys have met people like this, but he wanted to be involved in everything because Jesus changed his life, and he thought, I just whatever it takes to get involved. And so he joined the greeting team, he joined the worship team, he joined the children's ministry team, the hospitality team, like you name it, men's ministry, whatever he could be a part of, discipleship during the week, whatever was going on, he's like, I want all of it. Because he was on fire for what God had for him. But as the months kind of rolled on, quickly he started not only just experiencing some burnout, but understanding like things were not going the way that he expected them to go. See, he was on fire for Jesus, and he thought because of his passion, because of what God had done for him, he could make this huge impact and game-changing thing in all of these ministries. But quickly he realized that all of these ministries were suffering because he couldn't give time to all of them. There's too many things, too many different things going on, that when he stopped to think about it, he thought, okay, well, let me pick one ministry. You know, keep small groups, keep Sunday mornings, but one ministry to serve in. Let me work out of the one thing that God is actually calling me to do. Instead of just everything, let me focus my attention. He picked children's ministry, and I have never met a children's minister who is as on fire as he was. He was everything that I thought I was gifted for when it came to VBS, the fun guy, the entertainment, the spreading the gospel, all of these things. He showed all of these things. He rocked the leg guitar thing and like the whole bit, and he was fantastic with the children, and it revolutionized the way that we did children's ministry. Because instead of just doing something good, instead of just being a part of all these different ministries, he said, I want to trade that for something great for God. I want to focus in and do something that matters for God. So this morning I ask, are you prepared to trade something good for something great? To focus on what God has in store? You see, sometimes we get caught up in life and we spread our attention too thin. We do 1.5 million things, and then we wonder, why are we not being used the way that we hoped that we would? There's too many things going on. Now, I want to throw out a caution. This is trading something good for something great. This doesn't mean giving up things of God. This doesn't mean, well, I'm just not going to go to church anymore, or I'm not going to do all these things. That is not what God is saying. That is not what Philip did. What it means is focusing on what God is calling you to do. We are all gifted by God. We all have gifts and callings from God, and when we focus on those, it helps us to live the life that God has for us and to do the most impact for God's kingdom. This means prioritizing the things in our lives. Oftentimes, it means giving up something bad for something good. Acts chapter 8, verses 4 and 5. It says, Now those who were scattered went about preaching the word, and Philip went down to the city of Samaria, and he proclaimed to them the Christ. He proclaimed Jesus to these people. See, Philip gave up something good for something more great that God had for them, that God had for him. And as you continue through Acts chapter 8, there are amazing results because of what he gave up. So this morning, I ask, what are you willing to give up for God? Maybe it's TV. Maybe you watch a lot of TV when you should just go to bed or change your day. Maybe it's time on the phone. I know the phones, they tell you how much time you spend on your phone a day. If you have an iPhone, it gives you this weekly report. I just get rid of it. It's embarrassing, right? You're just like, no, I don't even want to see it. I don't want you to tell me what I already know that I should be doing. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's trading something for something better. Maybe it's swapping something in your week so that you can make it to small groups on Wednesday nights. Maybe it's swapping a ministry for a different ministry. Whatever that looks like, we need to be prepared to lean into what God has for us. Understanding that we're not swapping things for us. We're swapping things for God and what God is leading us into, so that we can achieve what God has for us. The third thing is that if we are going to evangelize, we need to be prepared to share the gospel no matter where we are. Verse 13, Acts chapter 8, says, Even Simon himself believed, and after being baptized, he continued with Philip, and seeing signs and great miracles performed, he was amazed. Even Simon himself believed. Philip gets to this area, and he knows that there's this guy who has been preaching this false gospel and raising himself up at the expense of the people for a long time. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I would think to myself, well, I'm not even going to go after that guy. That guy's problems, right? We're just going to talk to all these other people, and we're going to convert the people, and God can deal with him. He's doing his own thing. But Philip preaches to Simon. This guy who thinks of himself as a god, this guy who thinks of himself as so great, Philip goes, no, I'm going to preach to him. Because here's the truth, no matter what we think of ourselves, No matter how big our ego, no matter what's going on in our life, it pales in comparison when we're confronted by the power of God. That when Simon saw true power from God, power and grace, and the way that the gospel was laid out, he knew without a shadow of a doubt, this is what I need to be a part of. This is worth being a part of. And how powerful that testimony becomes, because Philip decided to share where he was with anybody that came up to him. Shortly after I had graduated high school, I had been working at a plumbing company, and I had gotten a flat tire. And of course, it's Friday, long work week, long work day, 12-hour day, ready to go home, driving down the freeway, and flat tire. This is not what I need for my day. And so I pull off the side of the road. I'm looking to change the tire, get everything out. I got one of those little crank jacks that's super tiny, and so I'm mashing my knuckles on the asphalt every time I'm making the turn. I don't know if you guys have been there. And I'm getting more and more frustrated, starting to use words I probably shouldn't use, but every time I smack the asphalt, it's been a day. And so as I'm trying to deal with this jack is too small for the car, but it was what we had, and trying to make this work, smashing my knuckles, I'm bleeding on my hand, I'm frustrated. Lo and behold, it starts to rain, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I thought God loved me, right? This is one of those moments you're like, what is going on? It's a terrible day, and I'm frustrated, and the one silver lining is I had already bought Taco Bell to take home, so I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm not even going to change my tire. I'm just going to sit in my car in the rain on the side of the freeway and eat Taco Bell, because that's what my life amounted to. I thought, well, this is as good as my life gets on a Friday night. And so I'm sitting there eating my Taco Bell, and lo and behold, there's a tap on my passenger side window. And I'm like, great, it's the cops. This is the last thing that I need. And so I roll down the window, and it's not the cops. It's this gentleman. And he goes, hey, bud, I saw that you had a flat tire. I was wondering, did you need some help? And I was like, look, I got everything I need. I'm just having a difficult time. And he's like, don't worry about it. I got you. And this guy, standing out in the rain, goes, I'll change it. Don't worry about it. And he pulls out this industrial-sized floor jack, like at an actual auto body shop. And I'm like, yes, why do you carry that? I don't even care why you carry that around. You are my hero right now. And so he starts jacking it up, and he starts taking the lug nuts off. And as he's going, we start having this conversation. He asked me about my life, asked me about my day, can see that I'm clearly frustrated. And as we're talking, he goes, hey, have you heard about this guy named Jesus? And I'm like, yes. I'm a youth leader at this point. I've been doing church for a long time. I'm like, yeah, I know Jesus. And we have this great conversation in which he tells me that he has decided, or felt called by God, to do this street ministry. So he drives around the freeways with industrial tools to fix tires, and he finds people when they're down on their luck with a flat tire, and he talks to them about Jesus as he changes their tires. His name was Ben. Very nice man. Ben, I don't know if you're watching, but very nice man. I called him Ben the tire guy, because not only did he change my tire, not only did we have this great conversation, he prayed for me when I left. And not only did he pray for me, he says, hey, here's my phone number. If anything happens on the way home, call me. I'll come back and get you. Less than an hour, I talked to Ben. Over a decade ago. I still remember Ben. Because Ben shared the gospel exactly where he was at. And yeah, I already knew the gospel. But I'll tell you what, Ben didn't know that when he rolled up to my car. And in that moment, he breathed life into my otherwise what felt like a terrible day. I can't tell you how elated I was when he asked me if I knew Jesus. I thought, oh my goodness, yes. Like God does love me. Look at this, guys. Like just as this unfolds. And I know that's not exactly how God works, but there was this moment where I realized, man, Ben understood, and he pursued God in an amazing way. Because I have not changed a tire since, and I have no intention of changing a tire. Ben is changing tires all over California, I assume, to this day. Because he knew that when people are down on their luck, people need to know about God. That when God calls you to share, it's time to share, no matter what that looks like. And I don't know how his percentile works. I don't know how many people are like, yeah, this is great. I'd love to know more about God. And I don't know how many people are frustrated when he comes to them. But either way, Ben shows up, he helps out, and he tells them about Jesus. And it was a fantastic encounter that I will never forget in my life because of the way that he went about it. You see, I think sometimes in our lives we tell ourselves, I don't need to talk to that person about Jesus. Like, they know. Like, if they want to know more about Jesus, they'd come talk to me. They know I go to church. They just have no interest. And so we blow it off. That's not what God is calling us to do. And look, I know that it is scary. That if you take the time to talk to people about Jesus, the success rate, if you will, that conversation goes well, is not always very high. But here's the thing. That success rate is not what we're called for. God didn't say, hey, here's some metrics and you have to get 80% acceptance every time you share the gospel. That's not what God asked us. God said, hey, go make disciples. God said, preach the good news. He'll take care of the rest. I know that sometimes we think, well, that person's not going to receive it. That person, I just feel like I wasted my time. But I tell you what, we don't know the seeds that we plant. I don't know everybody's story in here, but I do know that there are many people at many churches, countless people at countless churches across America and across the world that were reached by somebody and wanted nothing to do with Christ until years later when something happened in their life and they thought, I remember Ben the tire guy. Or I remember that person that shared. I want that in my life now. The churches across the world are filled with people because God used the seed that we planted. It's not us. It's God. So I asked this morning, are you prepared to share the gospel? Not hypothetically, not, if it came up, I could probably do it. Are you ready to share the gospel with everybody that you meet? That's a hard thing. It's difficult. Philip traded a good life in the church. He was doing good work for God. He was helping the church as a whole, and he was helping manage all the logistics, and he traded all of that for what God had called him to do. And so really the better question this morning, as we get ready to close out, is if God asks, are you ready to move? Because that's what evangelism becomes. If God says, hey, will you preach? Will you share the gospel this morning with this person? Are we prepared to say yes? Or are we, maybe if they're here next week, maybe if I run into them again, now's not really a good time. I'm kind of in a rush, Do we make excuses? Or are we ready to share exactly where we're at? Because as Acts chapter 8 continues, there's another story. Philip leaves Samaria and he continues on his road. And as he continues on the road, he finds somebody else, and God says, hey, share the gospel with this man. Philip's never met him, doesn't know what he does, doesn't know anything about this guy traveling in a carriage. Philip is just some random, probably dirty person walking on the road, right? Just because roads aren't paved, it's all dirt, and it's crazy out there. And he's been on the road for a little bit, and so he looks like someone that spent some time on the road. And God says, hey, go up to this guy in his carriage with his people and all these things and share the gospel. There's not a more intimidating way to be asked to share the gospel. But God says, do it. And you know what Philip says? Philip doesn't say anything. He just turns and does it. There's no discussion needed. God had asked, and so Philip fulfills. And as Philip preaches and teaches to this Ethiopian eunuch, another person is baptized. Another person for the kingdom. Not because Philip wanted to do it, Not because Philip would have done it by himself, but because God had called and Philip said yes. So this morning, as we are all called to evangelize, we are all called to make disciples. God is called. Are we going to say yes? Pray with me, please, as the worship team comes up. Heavenly Father, Lord, this morning I ask that you give us the courage to say yes, or to answer your call. Lord, I know that sharing the gospel is not an easy task, that telling people of this great news of Jesus, well, it's great news and it's life-changing news. There's something inside of us that just doesn't want to cause controversy, doesn't want to share, doesn't want to make a big deal out of things. But Lord, I know that when we do open up, when we do share, you use that for amazing things in your kingdom. And so this week, as opportunities arise, and Lord, I know that you have placed opportunities in front of us. I pray that you give us the strength, but give us the strength to take advantage of those opportunities, to share your truth with people. And Lord, not to worry about what it's going to look like, not to worry about what the other people say, not to worry about any of those other things other than the fact that you have asked this of us and that we will do it for you, Lord. Help give us that strength this week. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, if you are able, please stand and join us for a song of celebration this morning.